Hi folks, this exercise video is a companion piece to my most recent blog entitled Lessons from Back Pain. I decided to make this video and write that blog because a few weeks ago I developed my own bout of right-sided low back pain. I took my own advice and got some professional care, did my rehabilitation exercises, and I'm happy to report that I'm feeling pain-free. And I thought, what a great opportunity to share with you the strategies I took to get better. So feel free to search out my blog on my website or in your newsletter that I send you by email. When I was injured, I was still able to work, but I was pretty limited in terms of pain and mobility. And so the first things that I would do to start getting better was just move in ways that I was able to move without causing too much pain. So to get started with this exercise video, I'm just going to run through some of the stretches that I incorporated at the beginning of my back pain episode. So the first thing that I was sort of comfortable to do was to just gently get into child's pose. If you're not familiar with child's pose, it's a yoga term. Basically, it's sitting back onto your heels and reaching forward with your arms. When I was hurt at the very beginning, I'm not even sure I was able to get this far into child's pose. I might have been more like this, but over time, I was able to sit back and get a full child's pose stretch. There are variations to the way you can do child's pose. For instance, I can come up a little higher and reach a little further. That'll move the stretch a little bit up into my shoulders. But because I wanted to feel it in my mid and low back, I was trying to get a little bit deeper into my knee bend. And then while I was here, I wouldn't rush the stretch. I would spend some time deep breathing and spending upwards of 90 seconds, even 2 minutes in these positions. Another position that I would be comfortable to do would be I would uncurl my toes here. And again, from a yoga world, moving into downward dog to get a good stretch along my calves, my hamstrings, and my back. And spend some time breathing. I would then lower myself down and gently start to come up into a back extension, sometimes known as cobra. And I can even put my forearms down on the ground and just hold this position and breathe into my belly. And spend some time doing these positions. And because I'm not really able to do other forms of exercise at this point in the rehabilitation, I would go back and forth between all these stretches to create the movement in the joints and the muscles of my spine. And I'd come back down to my knees, and I would do a little bit of cat-cow. Now, later in the video, you'll see I get a little bit more specific or segmental with my cat-cow. But at first, when I was in pain, I would just sort of come up a little bit through my mid-back and breathe. And drop down into the cow position and breathe. And I could sit back down into child's pose. and rinse and repeat. And I would do that probably multiple times a day. My pain was sort of concentrated on the low right side. So then I started to also do some side bending. You'll notice that in those first exercises, they were all in this plane of motion. But I needed to get the side body stretched out, so I started doing some standing and kneeling versions of this side bend. So I would just throw my right arm up over my head and just breathe. And with this stretch, with every breath out, I would probably get a little bit more range of motion and able to side bend a little bit further until I really start feeling the stretch on the side body and low back. And even though my pain was concentrated on the right side, I would not neglect the left side. And as days went by and I was getting a little bit better, spasms were going away, it was more of a ache, then I would start getting into some other forms of stretching. So I was doing sort of the flexion and extension movements, and then I got into the side bending, and then the next movements I wanted to get into were rotational movements. So I started to incorporate two different rotational stretching. So the first one, which I will often refer to as the spinal twist stretch, is lying on your back, arms out like a T, and then pulling one knee over to one side. And again, spending time breathing. And if it hurt, and sometimes it did, I would actually reduce the size of the stretch and then breathe again. And what I would find is over time, with my breathing, allowing my nervous system to relax, I would be able to go a little bit further. And I'd even get back to that point where I had pain, but because I had spent time breathing and spending time getting into that range of motion, I was able to achieve the range of motion that was causing me pain, and now without pain. And then I would do, again, the same thing on the other side. You should get a nice stretch all the way up through the low back, a little bit into the glutes as well, depending on how much you're pulling your knee up. The other rotational stretch that I did that I found a lot of relief from, again, targeting sort of the big low back muscles, is I would sit a little bit cross-legged like this and rotate this way. I put my hand down for support here, sitting up tall and rotating through the low back. This is a common position for people when they want to kind of crack their own back. Of course, you can come see me for that. But you may get some cracks out of your low back, even mid back, when really pushing the range of motion of this rotational low back stretch. And then here it is on the other side. And always breathing. So as I was getting better, I moved beyond just stretching. Now, when I say that, keep in mind, I was still stretching and doing all those stretches every day, but now I was adding a little bit more complexity to my rehabilitation plan. So I started adding more of the mobility exercises to get specific movements of the joints. So the first one, and I alluded to this earlier, is I evolved from what I call the global cat cow, and I started getting more into the segmental cat cow, so moving one joint up the spine at a time. Like so. And I would start from the top as well. So making sure that all the joints of the spine are starting to move relative to one another. The next mobility exercises that I incorporated would be the hip cars. So lots of ways to do hip cars. Because I was dealing with back pain, I was spending a lot of time on the ground. So I'll do a hip car in quadruped position here. We'll do a few in this rotational pattern, and then go the other way. Then I would do some neck cars. Now, the neck is a long ways away from the low back, but it is part of the spine, and whenever there's a spine-related injury or pain, it's valuable to get the entire spine moving. So I would spend some time breathing and doing my neck rotations. And the next sort of mobility or stretch or exercise, whatever you want to call it, that I would also incorporate when I was able is just a squat. So just being able to hold a squat position, you get a lot of joint mobility and a lot of stretching happening with the squat. So just coming into this position. Now, not everybody has the mobility or flexibility to get into this position, but if you can, it's a great position to get into and to hold. You can do a little bit of movement around your ankles. And so I would incorporate all of these stretches and mobility exercises as part of my daily, if not multiple times a day, movement strategy to combat my back pain. Now, once I was feeling able to take it to the next level, now I started getting back into some of the core exercises that are necessary to engage the low back musculature, both for mobility and for core stability. So some of the exercises that I did are the same exercises. In fact, all these stretches and mobility exercises and now strength exercises were key to my recovery, but I would argue they are just standard exercises to incorporate into your routine all the time. Because whatever is good for recovery is probably good for maintenance. And we can progress these exercises and make them more difficult and more challenging. So you meet the moment with your exercises. You make them more or less challenging, hold them for longer, be responsive to your level of pain. We're not trying to push yourself into too much pain. We're trying to use these exercises to feel good. So I got into what I consider the, absolute, core low back strengthening, core strengthening exercises. So the first ones that I would do would be bird dog. So bird dog is a quadruped on all fours exercise. It's all about stability through the core. So the first thing I would do is pelvic tilt, just to get a little bit of engaged neutral spine. And then I would do right arm, left leg. And at first I would just alternate between left arm, right leg, and right arm, left leg. All the while, the purpose here is a strong, balanced core. It's not necessarily about how high or far or stretched out the leg and arm is, because if you've compromised your low back, you sort of miss the point of the exercise. But as you get better at these, you'll find you're able to stabilize and have good balance and good reach. Bird dog. Then I would flip over and do a very similar core exercise, but this time it's lying on your back, and it's called dead bug, or as some people like to say, dying bug, because the bug is still moving. So in this exercise, again, I'm going to do left leg, right arm, and then right leg, left arm. I've pelvic tilted to keep my core stable. And I'm moving my left leg and right arm. All the while, again, the purpose of the exercise is core stability. So if you find that as you reach further and further with your leg or your arm, you're compromising the stability you feel in your low back, well, then you're reaching a little too far. So bird dogs and dead bugs. Then I got into my planks, my front planks and my side planks. Now this one I was, a little nervous to do earlier on in my recovery because I didn't want to create more tension in the side body muscles that were giving me pain. So I did progressively longer holds of my planks. So for example, a side plank, if you notice my feet, you can start off with a plank where you're actually on your knees. It's a little less challenging. Then you can go into off your knees, but with split leg stance. And then as you get stronger and your balance is improving, you can stack your feet and maintain that side plank. You can do whatever you want with this arm as well. You'll notice in some progressions of the side plank, people will start sort of rotating through. They'll add dips, but even just a stable side plank is an effective exercise. And I would do that on both sides. And that would move into the front plank, which again can be on your hands with extended wrists. Notice I'm going to toggle my low back into a sort of posterior pelvic tilt with a braced core. And if you don't like the extended wrist position, you can always come down onto your forearms as well. And you can progressively hold these planks longer as your strength improves and your pain goes down. One more exercise that I did, I'm just checking my notes, one more exercise that I did just to give me some more activity that was not painful was I did some glute bridges as well. So I would lay on my back, put my hands on the ground, and come up through the glute bridge. You'll feel some activity in your hamstrings and your glutes. And this gave me another exercise I could do that was not painful. So all in all, I spent a number of days stretching, doing mobility work, doing some core stabilization exercises, improving the landscape of my low back. And, and each day, as we would all do when we have pain, we poke around and see how the pain is doing. I'm happy to report that I, feel 100% now, but I certainly didn't 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And, it's a little humbling as a chiropractor because you all come in and see me to help you with your pain. And then I'm dealing with it myself. But the good news is the strategies that tend to work do in fact tend to work, and I put that into action, and in fact I recovered nicely. Now, perhaps I would have liked to have recovered faster, but the thing is, we never know. We never know if the recovery time that we took was less than if we hadn't done all the right things. We just don't know. So all we can do is stack our odds to get a full recovery by doing what the science tells us is the best strategy. And definitely the best strategy with back pain is a return to activity as fast as possible. Now I enlisted the help of some health professionals, just as I would encourage you to do with me, is I visited my chiropractor, I had a massage, I have physiotherapy and massage therapy right in my own office, so it's very convenient, more convenient probably than for you, but hopefully you're able to get in and see me when you need to see me. As I stated earlier, this is a companion piece to a blog I wrote, so I've listed out the exercises that we've discussed here in blog format. And of course, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to leave a comment, send me a question, give me a call, pay me a visit. Pain sucks, it affects your mood, it disrupts life, but it's part of life, and I'm here to help when you need me.